Hello again, Ancient Studies students. This is the second lecture of the week. Our focus is going to be the 3rd century crisis and then the reforms of Diocletian and Constantine. So, if you have not yet gotten a chance and you are interested, I encourage you to check out the supporting materials that are uploaded online. There are two readings. One is this little page on the good and bad emperors, and then the other is on the decline of the Roman empires. And if you read these two little handouts, it will significantly help in giving you context for our lecture today. But we're going to jump from the Pax Romana, which we were talking about last week with Augustus Caesar through Marcus Aurelius, all the way to Diocletian. So we're skipping 150-ish years, 180 to 300 or so. So a little bit more than 100 some years of history of the Roman Empire. Those two handouts fill in some of those gaps. But what I want to get to is the 3rd century crisis. And rather than me doing all the talking today, I would like to watch this short video. I believe it's from Coursera, but needless to say, here's a short video to set up our discussion today on the reforms of Diocletian and Constantine.
The 3rd century crisis was a period in which the Roman Empire came very close to collapsing. It was a time when the position of emperor lost its power, and to put it in modern-day terms, the inmates began running the asylum. With this collapse of authority, things like civil war, foreign invasion, economic depression, and even a plague brought the Roman Empire to its knees. To help us remember the causes of the crisis, we're going to call them the 5 F's: feuding, factions, funding, foreigners, and a freaky disease. Fortunately for the empire, a man named Diocletian would step in to save the day. Before we get to the hero of the story, let's take a look at how the crisis began. Then we'll delve into our 5 F's. When we're finished, we'll get to our hero, Diocletian. The 3rd century crisis began with the end of the Severan dynasty of emperors. The Severan emperors, while being rather violent and a bit nuts, maintained control of Rome for several generations. Their strength as rulers kept the military and the people from open rebellion. However, when Severus Alexander, the last of the Severans, was assassinated, the title of emperor went up for grabs. Soon dozens of wealthy military leaders fought for the throne, creating chaos and throwing the empire into a civil war. These civil wars give us our first F, feuding. Our second F is factions. Seeing the empire in chaos, the conquered territories of Rome decided to add to the melee by breaking from the empire and creating their own factions. The territories of Gaul, Spain, and Britain declared their independence and named themselves the Gallic Empire. They even went as far as crowning their own emperors. Witnessing the rebellion of these territories, the eastern provinces, comprised of Syria, Palestina, and Egypt, also decided to try their hands at revolution. Making matters worse, the territories that did remain loyal to Rome were burdened with warring generals trying to assert their power. These generals, who were mostly killed in battle or assassinated, are known to history as the barracks emperors. As if civil war wasn't enough, the 3rd century crisis was a period of economic depression. From this we get our 3rd F, funding. In order to try to gain or keep power, Rome's rulers began bribing soldiers to play on their team. To come up with the extra funds, those in power started decreasing the amount of precious metals in the currency. In other words, they made the coins worth less and less. Sounds eerily familiar. In doing this, the buying power of Roman currency plummeted and inflation spread like bad news. Also, since currency meant so little, people began trading and bartering rather than paying and purchasing. Since no money was trading hands, tax revenue was scarce, and the economy of the empire fell further into a pit. With little money, the empire found itself going from the frying pan into the fire. Since money was barely flowing, Rome had little with which to defend itself from our fourth F, foreigners. Add to this that the Roman armies were busy fighting each other, and attacking Rome became as easy as shooting fish in a barrel. Before long, Germanic tribes were allying with one another and ransacking prosperous Roman cities. While the Germanic tribes were wreaking havoc in the north, Persians were attacking from the east, pillaging cities and even capturing one of the acting emperors. Adding complete insult to injury, our fifth F, a freaky disease, hit the empire. This freaky disease, known as the Plague of Cyprian, hit the empire in the midst of all these other troubles. Unfortunately for Rome, the plague was as capricious as the warring generals. Having no respect for rank or position, it devastated towns and villages, killing farmers, soldiers, and whomever it saw fit. Fortunately for Rome, the sun began to come out with the rise of a few competent emperors. First, Emperor Claudius II began shoring up the borders in around 270 CE. He did this by running the Gauls out of the empire. Unfortunately for Rome, the darn plague set its sights on Claudius, and he died before being able to gain complete control. Next to take the throne was an aggressive and smart military man known to history as Aurelian. Upon taking the throne, Aurelian saw victory against the Goths, the Gallic Empire, Syria, Palestinia, and Egypt. For this he earned the title Restorer of the World. Unfortunately for Rome, his bodyguards, who must not have been too impressed with his restorations, assassinated him in the year 275 CE. Yet another kick in the shins for the Roman Empire. Fortunately for the empire, their prince was about to come. In the year 284 CE, Diocletian came onto the scene, claimed power, and began to pull the empire from the pit of despair. Picking up where Aurelian left off, he instituted several reforms. Also, in order to let the people know he was boss, he took a page from Aurelian's book and began calling himself Lord and God. This move set him up as a deity not to be messed with. In the matter of the economy, Diocletian also took the bull by the horns. He introduced coins with pure metal content. These coins became known as the gold solidus, the Latin word for solid, and soon became the standard currency of the empire. To battle inflation, he instituted an edict on maximum prices, which was basically a comprehensive list telling suppliers what they could and could not charge for an item. In other words, the edict, not the market, determined price. Not one to back away from a fight, Diocletian also took on the military. Unlike many of his predecessors, Diocletian was not afraid to leave the safety of Rome. This made him a force to be reckoned with. Adding to this, he created a cavalry-based army, which he could deploy as soon as trouble arose. He also split troops into layers, leaving some at the borders, but also placing some within the interior of the empire. Perhaps his greatest military tactic was the creation of the Tetrarchy, in which he placed 4 rulers across the empire to keep his laws and orders. In doing this, Diocletian could keep his finger on the pulse of the empire. At the end of Diocletian's remarkable reign, the empire had crawled its way from the dark pit known as the crisis of the 3rd century. Yes, problems like foreign invasion, a pathetic economy, and civil war would eventually sink the empire. However, Diocletian will be remembered as the man who conquered the crisis of the 3rd century and kept the empire standing for a little while longer.
Hopefully you learned a little something from that video. If you can keep in mind her 5 F's, you'll be in good shape. Let's see if we can do them. There's feuding, factions, fighting, foreign invasions, funding, and of course, our freaky disease. But if we want to talk about even more simple terms, there are really 3 reasons that lead to the 3rd century crisis. Right? And they're all the same that have resulted in the downfall of empires and dynasties all year long. Right? There is violence in the empire, inadequate human resources and economic distress. The violence from internal strife and foreign invasion, inadequate human resources, pretty much because of the plague and all of the death and destruction. There just aren't enough people to do the jobs of an ever-expanding empire. And then the whole funding and the emperors decreasing the value of coins and taxes, people trading instead of paying in money, make taxes really hard. All of these things make it seem like the empire is going to collapse. And if it weren't for Diocletian and Constantine, it probably would have in the 300s. Because of their reforms, it lasts for almost another 200 years. The last official emperor of the Western Roman Empire, I believe, resigns in 476 CE. So they managed to make the empire last a little bit longer. But let's talk specifically about Diocletian and Constantine. We heard a lot in the video about the reforms of Diocletian. I want to just highlight them again. Right? First of all, princeps, if you remember, Augustus calls himself princeps, first citizen, becomes dominus, Lord and God. So that the emperor forgets about any of those false pretenses of republicanism, and he is definitely going to be an autocrat. Right? One of the first things Diocletian does is he divides the empire into an east and a west, and in each he will establish an Augustus and a Caesar. So there will be 4 rulers. All right, the tetrarchy. Don't worry about the reflection questions. That's from a different thing. He also encourages local rule by establishing dioceses within those regions. So think provinces or states that he names after himself, Diocletian. He calls them dioceses, where there will be local rule to make sure his decrees are being carried out. As they mentioned in the video, he fixes prices and wages, meaning he sets what people can be paid to work and what things can cost. So you can only do this if you're an autocrat. There is no supply and demand economy, capitalism, none of that stuff. Right? He says a loaf of bread is going to be worth 2 coins, and everywhere in the Roman Empire you have to sell your loaf of bread for 2 coins. If you're a baker, you're going to get paid this much money, and everywhere throughout the empire, bakers get paid that much money. That's the way he does it. He also locks professions to try to curb inflation and to prevent people from just running from get rich quick scheme to get rich quick scheme. He makes it so you can't change jobs. If you're a baker, then your son will be a baker, then his son will be a baker, and that's the way it is. Forget about freedom of choice. Right. Diocletian also quickly reforms taxes to make taxes payable in kind. And what that means is that you can pay your taxes in product instead of money. This is not uncommon, but since people are beginning to barter instead of using gold or using coins, it's really hard to tax 6% of a chicken. Right? So instead, Diocletian makes it so that you may pay your taxes in kind. So if you are a chicken farmer, I don't know why that's my example today, you can give 6% of your chickens, so you actually give chicken to the state, and the state can sell it and make the money or use it to feed the soldiers or what have you. So tax reform works. And during this period, there is a tremendous growth of villas and manorial estates that lead to serfdom. And this is going to be important for the future and the fall of the Western Roman Empire. Essentially, these large landowners offer protection for the people that work the land. So in return for protection and securities, poor workers give up their individual land to this larger landowner and essentially their freedom in order to work their land and receive protection from the landlord. This idea of manorial estates and serfdom will, of course, lead to medieval Europe, where you'll have a castle and the king controlling the surrounding lands, and it's his duty, the king's duty, to protect the peasants in his lands. And so this is all under the reforms of Diocletian. So this is a map of the Roman Empire under Diocletian. You can see the diocese labeled. The pinkish color is the Western Empire, the orange color is the Eastern Empire, and there's going to be the tetrarchy division of an Augustus and a Caesar of both the East and the West. I love this statue. You always see this statue whenever anyone talks about the tetrarchy, partly because it shows there is a huge lack of trust in the tetrarchy. You have these two rulers giving one of the world's most awkward hugs, but it isn't a real embrace because you can see each one still maintains the grip on his sword in case there's trouble. So there isn't a lot of trust in the tetrarchy. And quite honestly, he's right not to trust the tetrarchy, right? Because everyone's always trying to take over. So this is a map of the tetrarchy rather than diocese. You can see the Caesar of the West has Britain and Gaul, less desirable post. The Augustus of the West would have Spain and Italy, much more stable and desirable places. The Caesar of the East has kind of the Balkans, and then the Augustus of the East actually has Egypt, the Fertile Crescent kind of area, and Asia Minor. We'll talk about why that's most desirable in a second. So this is the district as Diocletian rules. But unfortunately for the empire, Diocletian dies, and with that death, so dies the tetrarchy as everyone else tries to fight to be the new Diocletian. The winner of that battle is Constantine. And Constantine quickly continues the reforms of Diocletian, but goes in a slightly different direction. All right, and the big difference that he focuses on is Christianity, this mystery religion that very few people have heard of, that actually previous emperors have persecuted, throwing Christians to the lions in the arena and things like that. Constantine actually legalizes. Now, I bracketed these two things because in 312, Constantine legalizes the practice of Christianity. It won't be until 380 CE when the Emperor Theodosius makes Christianity the official religion of the Roman Empire that becomes the religion of the Roman Empire. Constantine is often erroneously attributed that. Instead, he legalizes it and gives a lot of support from the state to Christianity, which makes it a very popular religion in the empire. It will become the official religion in 380. All right, and these are the reforms that Constantine does to kind of benefit the church. He frees clergy, Christian clergy, from imperial taxation, so they don't have to pay taxes. He actually uses the wealth of the Roman Empire to build Christian churches. He makes Sunday, the Christian holy day, a public holiday, so people are more free to attend services in Christian churches. He allows gifts to the church to be permissible and encouraged, tax exempt, things like that. And possibly the biggest reform is Constantine builds a new capital, which he names after himself, Constantinople, modern-day Istanbul. Right? And so if I go back to my other map, he moves the capital from Rome over to Constantinople, with Byzantium on this map, modern-day Istanbul. All right. And so the question becomes, like, why did Constantine make all of these reforms? Why does he embrace Christianity, and why does the political structure of the Christian church have so much a reflection of Constantine's fingerprints, right? And so, first of all, Diocletian had actually increased the persecution of Christians, right? He's like, we need an enemy to unite the empire. Let's persecute those Christians. And then the next ruler, Constantine, completely changes and throws all of the support of the empire at Christianity. What prompted this change? And the answer is a vision. At the Battle of Milvian Bridge, when Constantine, who was originally the Caesar of the West, was fighting, I believe it's Maxentius, for kind of dominance of the Roman Empire after Diocletian's death, They meet at the Milvian Bridge. And at least as the legend goes, the night before the battle, Constantine had a dream. And in this dream, an angelic voice, or maybe it's an angel himself, appears and he tells Constantine, in hoc signo vinces, meaning, in this sign you will be victorious. And then Constantine sees a brilliant flaming image of the Chi Rho. If you remember from our mystery religion lecture, the Chi Rho is a symbol of Christianity. And so as the legend goes, at the Battle of Milvian Bridge, Constantine has all of his troops paint crosses or Chi Rhos on their shields, and they go on to defeat Maxentius. And he becomes the new emperor. Right? So that's why Constantine embraces Christianity. He doesn't officially become Christian himself until his deathbed, but he welcomes Christianity into the state and supports it with the many of the Roman Empire. One of the ways he does this is that he issues the Edict of Milan. Right? The Edict of Milan in 313 CE, I believe Constantine takes over in 312, but in 313 CE, he passes the Edict of Milan, which makes it an official act of toleration of Christianity and other religions at the time. Once Christianity firmly has a foothold, they'll change that so that other religions are persecuted and Christianity is on top. But the Edict of Milan is the official act of toleration that welcomes Christianity into the Roman Empire. Right. Christianity actually begins to reflect the hierarchy of the Roman Empire, and the infrastructure of that church still exists today as a reflection of the Roman Empire. In fact, diocese, the idea from Diocletian, is how the church is going to organize itself. And each diocese is going to be headed by a bishop who is responsible for the preaching, the teaching, the organizing, the overseeing, and most importantly, maintaining orthodox doctrine, meaning the right teachings of the church, making sure no heretical teachings are being spread through the churches. All right? Eventually, popes, Pontifex Maximus, will be the Bishop of Rome, and they'll be kind of the head bishops of all bishops eventually in Christian communities. But there is a split. There's a split in the church between East and West. The Pope in Rome exerts a ton of influence and power over the Western Empire. Why? Well, Constantine isn't there. Constantine, remember, has moved his capital to the east. He's moved to Constantinople. Why do the Augustus, the head of the Roman Empire, always like the east? Because that's where the money is. And they don't have to worry about foreign invasion, and they don't have to worry about these Gaul tribesmen and the Germanic tribesmen and the Pict and the Celts and everybody else. The east is secure and incredibly wealthy. And so that's where the seat of the empire is. And in this void of power created in the West, the church and the Pope begins to assert a lot of that influence. The East, on the other hand, completely under the emperor's jurisdiction. And Constantine will insert himself into many of the religious debates. In fact, the head of the church in Constantinople is called the Patriarch. And he does not develop the same papal powers, but in the split in the church, where there's the Roman Catholic Church will be head in Rome, and then what becomes known as the Eastern Orthodox or the Byzantine Church, which will be seated in Constantinople, the Patriarch is going to be the leader of that Eastern Orthodox Church. In more modern times, the Pope and the Patriarch, the Roman Catholic Pope and the Eastern Orthodox Patriarch, actually met for the first time in like over 1,000 years or something ridiculous within your lifetime. I want to say it was probably 2014 or something. Feel free to look it up. But this split between the East and the West is going to be a huge deal kind of in the history of Europe and in the West. And that'll be a focus that you tackle next year in your Western Studies class. The Eastern bishops never acknowledge this primacy, and as I said, they become the Orthodox or the Eastern Christian Church. And that's it. We'll do a little bit more on Christianity and the church in class this week. Thanks so much for listening.